Kyrsten Sinema took to Twitter today, Martin Luther King Day, and wrote, "Today we remember the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., #MLK Day." Now, I'm not sure who's advising her, but I'm just going to offer some free advice here. If you are one of two Democratic senators unilaterally protecting the filibuster, which in turn is preventing any of the desperately needed voting rights legislation from passing, then you probably don't want to log onto Twitter so that you can post some platitudes about the guy whose life work was fighting for voting rights. Just, for starters. And in case there was any doubt as to where Martin Luther King Jr. would have stood as far as Senator Sinema is concerned, we really don't have to guess because he already made it abundantly clear.
The tragedy is that we have a Congress with a Senate that has a minority of misguided senators who will use the filibuster to keep the majority of people from even voting. They won't let the majority of senators vote. And certainly they wouldn't want the majority of people to vote because they know they do not represent the majority of the American people. In fact, they represent in their own states a very small minority.
The white moderate who's more devoted to order than to justice. Sound like anyone you know? Even Dr. King's family members have weighed in. Bernice King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, tweeted, "Pass voting rights legislation, Senator Sinema, in the United States that is among the most authentic ways to honor my father. If these state voter suppression laws persist, the America my father dreamed about will never come to be. Be a vessel for right." And what's craziest is that even Sinema herself acknowledges the threats to voting rights. Here she is only days ago.
Threats to American democracy are real. I share the concerns of civil rights advocates and others I've heard from in recent months about these state laws. I strongly support those efforts to contest these laws in court and to invest significant resources into these states to better organize and stop efforts to restrict access at the ballot box. And I strongly support and will continue to vote for legislative responses to address these state laws, including the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act that the Senate is currently considering. I support these bills because they strengthen Americans' access to the ballot box, and they better ensure that Americans' votes are counted fairly. It is through elections that Americans make their voices heard, select their representatives, and guide the future of our countries and our community.
And yet, even despite acknowledging these threats, still she vowed not to reform the filibuster because somehow, in her warped sense of view, the more urgent problem is the divisiveness that would be born out of eliminating the filibuster. Forget the divisiveness that comes from restricting voting rights and gerrymandering congressional districts and reducing the number of drop boxes and eliminating polling places in minority-majority precincts and allowing Republican-led legislatures to reorganize local elections boards. Forget that Republicans are still spreading the big lie as justification to enact those measures. Forget that Republicans fundamentally do not believe that Democrats have the right to be elected to office. Apparently that's all fine. The real issue would be eliminating the filibuster, which would actually allow us to address those things. That's the real divisive issue here. Got it. So look, there's still time for Sinema to mend her own legacy, and while my expectations aren't high, she can do the right thing when the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act comes to the floor and Chuck Schumer proposes a rules change to reform the filibuster. She could choose to back up the platitude she tweets, or she could just continue to block the voting rights reforms that she herself has the ability to help pass. But unless she decides to do the former, then she should probably lay off the Martin Luther King Jr. quotes while she's in the process of undermining his legacy. To see more videos like this, click the subscribe button right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work, subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. I cover the most important stories each week, and my guest is always one of the top political figures, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Cory Booker, and so many more. The podcast link is also right here on this screen, so give it a listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.